We're gathering here with a group of people who really do have the courage to care. And I want to salute you all because of the courage that you are showing and that you are keeping the legacy going of those who worked to save Jewish lives during the Holocaust. And I just really want to honour the Holocaust survivors here tonight. You are such a huge inspiration, and all of those here who are working to continue the legacy. What we don't ever want is a repeat of what happened with Kristallnacht and the Shoah. We need to say never again. Never again to the evil. Never again to such mass destruction of human life. Never again to a policy of appeasement. Never again to silence. And never again to inaction. And I know you are the kind of people here tonight that will say never again and will actually mean it. As has been said many times, that evil only needs to have good men and women who do nothing and say nothing for it to prosper. We need to be very vigilant and stand up in this time because there is a growing tide of anti-Semitism around the world. And we've seen some of it in Australia with the BDS, with what's happening at Sydney University, with the Centre for Peace and Conflict Studies promoting that, with the Greens Party promoting, or at least some of the Greens promoting the BDS, and also the incident at Bondi. And one of the things that I've asked myself is, what would William Cooper do? We know that in 1938, William Cooper led a protest against Kristallnacht, along with members of the Australian Aborigines League, marching from his home in Footscray into the German consulate in Melbourne and handing over a letter of protest that was not received. But I believe that that protest that William Cooper and the League made did reverberate around the world. I really want to just congratulate the work of B'nai B'rith and Courage to Care, because it actually really does take a lot of courage. And I want to read the words from Joshua 1-9. Have I not commanded you, be strong and courageous, do not be terrified, do not be discouraged, for the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go. And I've sometimes wondered whether those words to be very courageous in the face of intimidation, in the face of opposition, that these thoughts were going through the minds of the Raoul Wallenbergs, the William Coopers and the many others who had the courage to risk their lives, had the courage to stand up and be counted, even against intimidation, even against disregard. We know for William Cooper that he is not one of the righteous amongst the Gentiles, that he didn't in fact save any Jewish lives. But for an Aboriginal man who wasn't a citizen in his own nation, counted amongst the plants and the animals in the census of the nation, for him to stand up and be counted when he had no political clout. He was an old age pensioner. He was sick and he used to sit up in his bed and write letters. No heating in the Melbourne winters and no electric light by lamplight. He would write letters to prime ministers, fashion petitions to the King of England, write letters to newspapers around the nation. He had no economic clout, but he was someone who had a spiritual power. No political power, no economic power, but he had a spiritual power and he had moral power. He was someone who looked within himself to say, is this right? Is this justice? Is this fair play? And he knew the treatment of Jewish people in Germany and Austria at the time of Kristallnacht was something that he could not let go unnoticed. And within ourselves, we need to reach into the power within our own lives, the power of conscience, our spiritual and our moral power to stand up. And this is what William Cooper, Raoul Womberg and many others did. And they are an inspiration to us. I just want to share, I've got to watch my time, but I've been asked to share just really quickly on how I came to the William Cooper story, how I came to write the book. I read a book called One Blood by John Harris in about the year 2000. And there were many stories in there, but the story of William Cooper stood out to me. One of the reasons is that he inaugurated Aboriginal Sunday, as it was called at that time. William Cooper was a Christian, and Aboriginal people weren't really being treated very well in this nation at all. And he thought, well, at least the churches could get together and pray for them on a Sunday and do some messages about them to try and get the story out there. Now that developed over many years, from 1940 onwards, to what we know as National Aboriginal and Islander Week today. And I've been celebrating that for many years, and I thought, oh, he's the father of NAIDOC, the originator of that. And so I became interested in his story, how in Sydney on the 150th anniversary of white settlement, he held a day of mourning when the nation was celebrating settlement here. And then Norman and I went to Israel in 1998 to a conference there, and we visited Yad Vashem. When we went in there, we saw the plaque by T.W. White, the Minister for Trade and Customs from Australia, that was a response to the call of the nations at Evian in France in 1938 to take Jewish people as refugees into the nations. Now, all of the nations of the world at that time closed the door to Jewish immigration in South America. But the response of Australia is the only response that is actually recorded there at Yad Vashem, and many of you in the room have probably seen it. We were privileged to be there for the 50th anniversary in 1998 of Israel as a modern nation, the Jubilee. But what we saw in Yad Vashem really touched our hearts. Mr. T.W. White to say, we do not have a racial problem in Australia, and we are not desirous of importing one. Australia closed its doors. Many Jewish people who could have been saved from the Holocaust lost their lives because of Australia's decision at that time. So for Norman and I, it started a 10-year or so journey to right that wrong. And one of the things we did, we came to Sydney in 2002 and we saw Jeremy Jones, who at that time was at the Executive Council of Australian Jewry, and we also went to Efi Ben Netanyahu, who was the Israel Consul General, many of you will remember at that time, to the Sydney Museum and to WISO. And at all of those places we apologised for Australia's stand at Evian. And when we saw Jeremy, he got a photographer, much to our surprise. And as we were handing him a certificate of apology, it ended up in the Jewish News. We don't normally read the Jewish News, but someone from Sydney posted it to us in Cairns, You actually just can't buy it in newsagents. And we opened it and saw our photo, to our surprise, the little story there with Jeremy. But there was another article that particularly took our attention, and it was the story of William Cooper and the Jewish connection. And this little article in the Argus newspaper in Victoria that had the story of what William Cooper and the Australian Aborigines League did in 1938 in protesting Kristallnacht, it had been unearthed by someone. It was the tiniest little article. And so the Jewish Holocaust Centre in Melbourne celebrated what he had done, and there was this article in the Jewish News. And we thought, wow, we didn't know that William Cooper also had reached out to Jewish people and stood up against what he saw as the Nazi tyranny. I never intended to write a book on William Cooper, but I was just very inspired by his story. And standing up for Aboriginal people ticked a box for me. The fact that he was supporting Jewish people ticked a box for me as well. We tried to contact the family for a number of years, and amazingly, the contact came through Peter Wertheim, and he put us in contact with Kevin Russell, the great grandson of William Cooper. And Norman and I were leading a team of 14 Australians and 7 New Zealanders, an Anzac team, to Israel to take them around the battle sites of World War I and World War II, because one of the things that we celebrate is that Australia and New Zealand have stood with Israel in 2 world wars. One of the things that really inspires us is that we want Australia as a nation to be a nation that supports Israel in the United Nations, in national forums. And so the legacy of Australia in the world wars and in between, even I believe training the Haganah. And then Peter sent us an email saying there are going to be 17 parliamentarians from Australia in a bipartisan group in Israel in December, and there's going to be an honouring of William Cooper at Yad Vashem. And what was happening was that an academic chair of resistance to the Holocaust was going to be, on December 10, was going to be set up at Yad Vashem, and Albert Dadon actually endowed that. And we thought, oh, we would so like to be there for that particular event. But this was already November now, and the event was in December. But somehow we made our way back to Australia and then back to Israel a month later for that event. In that intervening month, what we did was to lobby Australian parliamentarians for a apology, government-to-government apology regarding Evian. And Kevin Rudd did just that. He was leading the team as Foreign Minister at the time. And so as well as giving a speech to honour William Cooper, he also did a government-to-government apology regarding Evian. If you're interested, have a look at the book. There's so many wonderful things there that William Cooper and the League did, and Uncle Boydie, the grandson, is continuing the dream, and we believe that he will be received in Germany to receive a response to... I better stop. If you want to know more about it, talk to me later. Yeah.